Jeff, what attracted you to the story of Richard and Mildred Loving? As I understand it, this was a story that was brought to you.
Yeah. Colin Firth, Jed Doherty, and Nancy Bursky, the woman that made the documentary The Loving Story, approached me in 2012 with her documentary in hand and said, we want to turn this into a narrative film. And I watched that film and was immediately struck by these two people. The nature of these people is what really drew me in. But then there was also this issue of the fact that I didn't know about it. I'd never heard of it. Why was that? And I imagine I'm not alone in that. Why is this story not part of the foundational part of our American history? This needs to be on our lips. We need to be talking about it. But at the center of it are these two beautiful people that I felt very connected with.
It is powerful watching these two people fight against the law, fight against the odds, all in the name of love.
Yes.
Now, you also wrote the script, so can you talk about the research that you did and structuring it into a screenplay?
Well, the research honestly was the easy part. Nancy, who had made this documentary, shipped me a hard drive, and it was like 4 years of research compiled into one thing. So I just had to kind of lock myself away and watch all of the outtakes of the archival footage, all of her interviews, and all of those outtakes. So I had a tremendous resource just basically handed to me. But then you have the issue of how to break it down into a film. I knew I would be dealing with a near decade. I'd had an idea, actually before this film even came around, that if I was going to have to tell a story over a long period of time in a rural area, that it might be interesting to do it through seasons. So I quickly applied that to this. Rather than having a chyron on the bottom of the screen that says, now you're in 1963, I wanted you to feel time slipping away. Because that's also one of the biggest injustices that was levied against them, was that they lost time. They lost time in the home that they wanted to be in. And so I wanted you to just feel this sense of it kind of slipping through your fingers. But that's an odd narrative. That's not 3-act structure. There isn't that kind of narrative design. There's no real bad guy other than this greater psychological threat that was hanging over them and that community as a whole, and the black community as a whole in the Jim Crow South. This idea that at any time you could be subjugated, at any time someone could come out of the tree line and change your life forever or end it. And those started to be the foundational elements that I was using for structure.
Let's talk about the cast, Joel Edgerton and Ruth Negga. Now, you'd worked with Joel before on your last movie, but Ruth is kind of her big first starring role. So
Right.
What made the two of them right for these roles?
Well, when I wrote this, I wrote these thinking of the real Richard and Mildred. I looked at this documentary footage, and that's who I wanted. I didn't want actors. If I could, I would have gone and cast Richard and Mildred. Ruth was the first person we auditioned. Francine Maisler's my casting director. She was the first one she brought in. I didn't know her work. I had no, preconceived ideas of who she was or even that she was Irish. And she sat down and started speaking, and it was flawless. There was this one word, American Civil Liberties Union, that Mildred said repeatedly in the documentary, and Ruth just nailed it. She just nailed it. So that decision was easy. She just fell out of the sky. And then there was Joel that I was working with on Midnight Special, and I just love the guy, And he has an amazing talent and facility for accent and voice. And I knew if I could give him this research, this archival footage of Richard, that he'd nail it.
There's a real sense of classicism in the style of this film. Now, through shotgun stories, through this, you've worked with a lot of the same crews. So can you talk a bit about crafting the style of this film with those people?
Well, yeah, I'm really proud of the directing in this film. It's the first time that I haven't really been learning on the job. Each film I've made, there's been a new challenge. From Shotgun Stories to Take Shelter, I was dealing with CGI for the first time. In Mud, I was dealing with Steadicam and boats in a tree and shooting on water, which is extraordinarily difficult. In Midnight Special, I was dealing with even more visual effects, practical stunts, and light. I knew how to make Loving from a directorial standpoint. The period piece thing was hard to get over, but a lot of that was shouldered by my amazing production designer, Chad Keith, and Aaron Bennett, my costume designer. And so for me, when I was just thinking about the task of directing, I felt fully in control for the first time, maybe ever. And there's a precision in the shot selection and the camera movement that I'm real proud of, because we went in thinking about it, we had a plan, and we executed it. And this film really, to a T, represents the ideas that we had in the script.
There's also a great sense of place to it as well. And he grew up in Arkansas, so I guess your southern upbringing kind of helped give you an affinity, shall we say, for this.
Well, absolutely. But it goes beyond that, because the idea of nature has been present in all my films, and how it affects the characters, but it's more of a background element. In this film, Mildred is driven by her connection to nature. You could also say her connection to home and family, but I think she was connected to the dirt, to the grass, to the leaves. She says it in the documentary. It's out of her own mouth, which I repurposed into the film, which is she's talking about the shame of her kids growing up in D.C. There's not even any grass for them to run in. I think she was connected to things, and I very much identify with that as a Southerner. The South is a complex place. There are things we love about it, and there are things that I don't love about it. But I'm still drawn to it.
It's amazing to think. I mean, you've said before that this is a story that not a lot of people know about.
Yeah.
It's also a story that happened not even 60 years ago in our history, and we're still fighting a lot of those same issues. What do you hope people take from this film?
I hope when they walk out of the theater and they're encountered with the inevitable conversations that we need to be having, conversations about racial equality, marriage equality, socioeconomic inequality, that before they just latch back on to any platform thinking, any political thinking or religious thinking, just for a split second, they think about these two people. They think about these two people that just loved each other and wanted to be left alone in the hillsides of Virginia. And maybe, as a result of that, if their minds aren't changed, maybe just the tenor of their conversation will change slightly.